What if a government didn't topple from tanks at the palace, but from a ledger that suddenly went dark? That's the bet behind a US Navy-led precision hit on cartel-linked financial and logistics nodes supporting Maduro's circle. No occupation, no broad bombing. We'll walk through the exact moment surveillance crossed into action, the 3 sites that mattered, and the immediate ripple inside Venezuela's power structure. Watch to the end to learn how that single night fed a triangle of pressure, collapsing cash flow, sanctions tightening, and domestic unrest accelerating. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Surveillance feeds showed nothing dramatic until 3 quiet patterns lined up and a Navy drone banked left over the Caribbean. No explosions on screen, no chase. Just a course correction that said the math finally clicked. On the destroyer's ops deck, the mission brief had stayed the same for weeks. Observe cartel-linked logistics, confirm offshore financial relays, and act only when command, cash, and comms intersected. The job wasn't to topple a flag, it was to unplug a payroll. Analysts had lived inside noise. Fishing boats pinged encrypted bursts and went dark. Private jets traced arcs that dodged standard air corridors and touched down for minutes at unlogged strips. A coastal warehouse showed heat but no manifests. Forklifts humming at odd hours with flatbed trucks backing in without barcodes to scan. The map looked like static until the timestamps started to agree. They called it the silent countdown. SIGINT teams tagged voice prints and device IDs that reappeared across islands. AIS signals from a Shell-owned bunkering barge skipped at regular intervals, like a heartbeat that didn't match the waves. Just after midnight, data handoffs jumped across 2 Caribbean relay points, and their spikes lined up with cross-border bank settlement windows that open and close like a toll booth. It wasn't a convoy you could see, it was a rhythm. Here's why that rhythm mattered. Money couriers don't move blind. They time loads to the minutes when clearinghouses sync, so cash, gold, or crypto instructions hit the right accounts while compliance teams sleep. It's the same reason Noriega-era networks leaned on correspondent banks that closed gaps between Panamanian fronts and US dollar rails. When those rails were interdicted, planes kept flying but the payoffs dried up. Shipments ride the shadow of finance because the risk window shrinks when wires reconcile and customs shifts change. The decision trigger came like a cord. Encrypted traffic spiked at a relay node outside Cartagena, used by a fishing coup that never sold fish. A Cayman nominee account started cycling funds through short-lived entities and then paused for a flag detect scrub, a trick you only burn when volume is high. At the same time, a fast boat train lifted off the water north of Falcon State, wake patterns indicating heavy weight and long legs. 3 pieces, 1 hour, same clock. Legal framing kept the scope tight. This moved like law enforcement with a military edge. Rules of engagement restricted kinetic effects to financial and logistic nodes, not population centers. The goal was to disrupt flow, capture data, and force errors, jam a relay, crater a barge's comms brain, disable a runway segment without rolling civilians into the blast radius or tipping off higher headquarters on the other end of the wire. Cut one site and the others reroute. Cut all 3 inside an hour and the ledger stalls. That was the bet. Warships had been repositioned to keep strike time short and recovery clean. Surveillance aircraft held wide orbits, mapping every handoff. Electronic warfare crews warmed up narrow beam jammers tailored to the SATCOM footprints they had catalogued at 15-minute intervals. The plan wasn't flashy, it was efficient. Orders flipped from observe to execute. A drone painted the first node while a destroyer's team lanced comms on the second, and a third asset rolled a runway denial kit into place before the jet could rotate. The relay chain blipped, recovered, then failed. On screens that never show blood, dashboards shifted from green to red as transfers timed out, inbound volumes stranded, and automatic retrieves exhausted. The pipeline didn't explode, it starved. Next, we break down the 3 hubs themselves: the offshore barge masquerading as fuel service, the micro uplink that carried ledger instructions, and the shuttle that hauled hard currency. How much moved through each on a normal day, and why cracking those valves did more than a battalion parked at the palace gates. The targets weren't fortresses, they were the cash valves Cartel de los Soles and Tren de Aragua used to keep loyalists paid. The team mapped 3 points that pushed money, not missiles: an offshore bunkering barge posing as a fuel service, a microdata uplink tucked on a leased platform out past the rigs, and a quiet jet shuttle that moved bearer bonds and hard currency like clockwork. None of them drew a crowd, all of them fed a payroll that kept guns, fuel, and favors moving. Conventional playbooks say, hit barracks or air defense. The task force went after the rails that keep those units fed. If you break the settlement routes and the covert logistics that backstop them, you don't need to crack a hangar door. You just make payday slide, then disappear. Hub 1 sat low on the water and called itself a service barge. On paper, it topped up trawlers and survey boats. In practice, it tied to front shipping firms that sold fuel at a loss and made it back in cash and gold. Fast boats came light and left heavy. Tanks full and lockers packed, using the barge as a floating vault and a refuel pit to reach longer handoffs. Analysts pegged its daily flow in the 2 to 4 million range, counting mixed bundles of dollars, scrap gold, and refinery product skim. The numbers came from repeat AIS gaps, brief rendezvous tracks, and the cadence of arrivals that matched bank windows on shore. Trade-based laundering hides inside this traffic. False invoices turn subsidized fuel into marine lubricants, overstate tonnage, and wash cartel revenue as freight offsets. Transshipment shells let paperwork jump flags mid-sea, so the same cargo earns new values on every leg. None of that is exotic in maritime finance. It thrives because port inspectors chase manifests, not the math behind them. Hub 2 was quieter, mounted on a leased platform where no one expected a finance desk. A briefcase-sized encrypted uplink pointed at a small SATCOM footprint and pushed ledger instructions, mixer routes, and wire authorizations to Caribbean intermediaries. It didn't need bandwidth, it needed timing, bursts aligned with clearing cycles and anti-fraud lulls, moving on and off-chain notes that told couriers when to step and banks when to blink. Daily flow, in terms of value transacted, hit 3 to 5 million on busy days based on the frequency of bursts, the depth of retries, and the recurrence of known wallet clusters. Treasury actions against facilitators and mixers in similar schemes show how central these micro-relays are to cross-border settlement because they knit cash handlers to correspondent banking without leaving a public trail. Hub 3 ran on polished concrete and hush. A private jet shuttle cycled through a rural strip with no billboard, flying cash, bearer instruments, and high-value chips toward a casino-friendly jurisdiction that welcomed quiet deposits. Loads varied by season and sanction pressure, but crews saw $0.5 to $1.5 million in movable value per rotation, with 2 or 3 rotations on active days. The chips helped. They slide past currency declarations and wash into cage balances with a single receipt. Bearer paper covered the rest, stored in a hard case, booked in minutes, and spun back into wires under new names.